Hello everyone and welcome to another World of Warcraft guide video. In today's video, I will be showing you how to solo the Mythic Castle Nathria raid, which was added in the Shadowlands expansion. Now before I proceed, it is very important to know that this will not be possible without a healing capable class. You can't do Mythic Sun King without the ability to pump some sort of decent off-spec heals. So if you can't heal, you can't do that fight sadly, which means you can't progress through the rest of the instance. The main reason to do this raid is for the Mythic transmog collection, especially from Mythic to Nathrius. I would like to announce that this and all guides going forward will now receive a rating system for each boss, which gives you an idea of how much effort you will need to put into defeating the bosses solo. There will be easy, intermediate, hard, and expert. For this raid as of 10.2.7, I'm going to overall rate it as hard. Some encounters are easy, but a few are hard, so you'll have to give it your absolute all to even make it possible. Now as always, the more gear the better. For this raid, I will recommend at least an item level 505 character with best in slot gear and set bonuses. You will see why as I go over the fights, which brings me to the first encounter, Shriekwing. This encounter I'm going to rate easy. Before you begin the fight, position the lantern near a pillar. More on that later. Once you begin the fight, the first mechanic you will need to handle is echolocation. When it expires, it puts a blood pool on the ground. So long as you don't stand in it and place it in areas that won't be a nuisance, you should be fine. The only other ability to pay attention to is Echoing Screech. This is where the lantern comes into play. In order to see the rings on Mythic, you need to have the blood light debuff on you from the lantern, so you will just need to run in the effect and back out. As long as you have this debuff on you, you can see the rings to dodge them. Getting hit by a ring causes you to flee for 4 seconds, and it becomes pretty annoying pretty fast if ignored. Do this mechanic correct, and the boss will fall. The next encounter is Huntsman Altimore, which I will also rate easy. This encounter is not too difficult, as long as you handle the ads. When you begin the fight, you will DPS Margor down. Any DPS you do to his pets will also be redirected, so don't worry about DPS on the boss. The next pet he brings in will be Barghast. DPS him down, but do not worry about the shades he cast. At this point, you should see your first Sin Seeker cast. This does tickle towards the end, so utilize the defensive or heal yourself back as it happens. As you can see on the screen, it does hit quite hard. Once Barghast goes down, you can turn to Huntsman and finish him off. The final pet isn't that dangerous, so you can choose to kill him or not. Very easy fight, just manage the Sin Seeker damage and you'll win. The next encounter is Hungering Destroyer. I am rating this encounter hard. This is your first real challenge in the raid. Mechanic wise, there isn't much to do. The problem is, you cannot heal yourself at all because of the ability Gluttonous Miasma. You are meant to have other players leech health off of you, and you leech health off of others. But being that you are doing this solo, it's literally a race to see if you die first or the boss does. Spec into any immunities or absorbs that you can here. For Red Paladin, I went with Blessing of Protection for an extra immunity. DPS the boss as fast as you can, pop any immunities or absorptions you can, and the boss should fall before you do. Toward the very end, the boss will consume. Try to get away as he will leech some health from you here. But if the boss is about to die, just stand in it and DPS him down before he can kill you. If you are struggling to beat the race, consider bringing consumables and drums for a head start. I was barely able to down him here without drums, so I know drums will make this more manageable if you struggle. Very tough encounter. The next encounter is Lady Inura Darkvein. I am rating this encounter easy. Pretty much a tank and spank fight. When she does the ability Concentrated Anima, an ad called Harness Spectre will spawn. You can kill it if you want. It only does damage if not engaged in melee combat. So if you're not a melee, just focus it down. I DPS'd it down anyway, just to be safe. But this fight is by far the easiest in the raid. Just Zerg her down, and the mechanics are pretty negligible. Easiest fight. The next encounter is Sun King Salvation. I'm rating this encounter expert. This is easily the hardest fight in the instance. It requires a lot of knowledge and coordination to pull off. If you're a Red Paladin, make sure you take the talent Healing Hands, as it increases your Word of Glory healing by 100% based on the target's missing health, which is very essential for healing Kael'thas. When you begin the encounter, you will kill all of the adds. The vile occultists are special throughout this fight, as when slain, they will drop an essence font, which you will need to heal to full. Healing these will pump some decent heals into Kael'thas. The goal here is to heal Kael'thas to 45% to begin phase 2. Don't just pump normal heals yet though. You are likely an off-heal spec, and you want to conserve mana and only heal Kael'thas when it makes sense. If no adds are up, you can channel on the soul pedestals to sacrifice some health to heal Kael'thas. As the next add flies down, you will notice an ability coming called Cloak of Flames. When this ability starts, Kael'thas will receive a healing absorb effect and begin to cast Unleash Pyroclasm. You have about a 4-second window to remove this, or he will land the cast and hit you for 2.9 million damage. Essentially, you're dead here. The best way to handle this is to be aware when it is coming. For Paladin, I precast a Flash of Light and had Holy Power ready for an instant Word of Glory. This combo was enough to remove the cloak. Play with your healing spells and figure out what the most quick and efficient way to remove this debuff will be. Once you get past the first Cloak of Flames, you will get a new set of adds called Soul Infusers. These are the most important adds in the fight. You will need to kill them as quick as possible, as they will drain Kael'thas of his HP pretty quickly. If he loses all of his HP, he will one-shot you and end the encounter. Once you have killed all the infusers, you will then go and collect each red orb that dropped on the ground. These give you a buff called Infuser's Boon, which increases healing done by 100% for 14 seconds, and it stacks. This means for 14 seconds, you will get 400% increased healing. Grab all the orbs, then pump heals into Kael'thas. If you do this correctly, he should easily push past 45% and begin phase 2. Clean up any remaining adds here. DPS down the Shade of Kael'thas. The only real thing to note in this phase is he will do his Cloak of Flames ability. You should have more than enough DPS to burst past it. The cast is auto-interrupt if you do this. Just make sure you switch to Kael when this ability goes off to DPS past the absorption. Once this phase ends, you will be sent back to the platform where you will rinse and repeat phase 1. The same mechanics apply. Pay attention to his Cloak of Flames cast. Precast heals to break the shield, handle the adds as mentioned before, and eventually you will push him to 90% HP. If you can get to this point, you have won. It's just a final 10% of health you need to DPS off the Shade to end the encounter. Why did I rate this expert? Because the coordination is really high. You are constantly under pressure from adds, and you rarely have any downtime. You need to take care of adds smartly and pump heals at the correct times. This will take learning, but if you can heal effectively and simultaneously DPS down adds, this fight is beatable. The next encounter is Artificer Zyoxx. I'm rating this encounter intermediate. The fight is mostly easy, but you do need to pay attention to one mechanic to prevent wiping. Most mechanics in this fight won't kill you though. When you start the fight, you can DPS him down until you get to the first stasis trap. Do not stand in these, they will stun you permanently. Another player is meant to break you out of this, so if you stand in one, it's a wipe, unless you have some sort of immunity to clear it off. Continue DPS until you begin to see blue seeds on the ground. You do not have to do this mechanic, but it's important because you know the next mechanic to avoid is coming up. If you have a boss mod, it will tell you to flee. When you get fixated, a fleeting spirit will chase you. It's a green ghostly looking model, and if it touches you, you'll get mind controlled and the encounter will reset. Pre-run away from it. Use movement speed if you need to. As you can see here, I was able to run it across the room without any movement speed buff other than the 11% speed that I had from gear. Avoid it and continue DPS on the boss. The next ability you will see is Edge of Annihilation. The mechanic won't kill you, but it does do 300,000 damage if you get sucked into it. The main reason to pay attention here is to not get sucked into the stasis traps, which will lead to a wipe. I actually ran into one here, but fortunately I had a bubble to remove the stun. As you may have also noticed, I got touched by the fleeting spirit. However, I was immune, which negated the mechanic. Continue DPS on Zyoxx. Avoid any obvious abilities, and the boss will fall. Once you defeat Sun King and Zyoxx, you will be able to descend down further to face the Council of Blood. I am rating this encounter intermediate. Not too hard of a fight, but there are a few important things of note. When you begin the fight, you will notice a debuff placed on you called Dancing Fever with 3 stacks. If you ignore this, after 30 seconds, you will be slain instantly. To deal with this, you just simply have to jump 3 times to remove each stack. Simple as that. It gets placed on you periodically throughout the fight, so make sure you keep an eye on your debuffs at all times. The order you kill them in doesn't really matter. I decided on Frida, then Stavros, and then Nicholas. Throughout the fight, you will notice an ad called Dutiful Attendant. You need to kill these as if left alone. They will channel a damage immunity into the lowest HP boss, making it impossible to kill them. Anytime a counselor member hits 50% HP, they will retreat and start the Dance Macabre. Run to the lit up tile and begin to follow their instructions. They will tell you to either go forward, left, right, or down. Doing this correctly will give you a stacking haste buff with 3% haste per stack. However, if you get it wrong, you will start to take ticking damage. For each consecutive one you get wrong, the harder it will tick. I didn't bother to check if this was lethal or not, but just do the mechanic correctly as best you can to be safe. DPS Frida down, and move on to Stavros. Nothing really important to note with this guy. You can ignore the begrudging waiters, they just do minor damage to you. Keep an eye on your Dancing Fever stacks, and move on to Nicholas. The only mechanic to do here is to DPS the veteran Stone Guard ads down. They will spawn and knock you back. The longer they are left alive, the stronger they get. Just switch to DPS it, and go back to Nicholas. Manage your Dancing Fever stacks, kill Dutiful Attendants, DPS down veteran Stone Guards, and do the Dance Macabre intermission correctly, and you will breeze through this fight. The next encounter is Sludgefist. I'm rating this encounter easy. Even if you don't do the mechanics right, this fight is still possible and very easy. When you begin the encounter, position him away from the pillars. He will do an ability called Stomp, which will destroy the pillars if it hits them. Just move out of it to avoid any unnecessary damage. He eventually will do an ability called Hateful Gaze. You want to position yourself behind the pillar so that he slams into it instead. If you fail this, you're not going to wipe, it just causes you to take a lot more damage than you need to. When he hits the pillar, he gets stunned for 12 seconds, and his damage taken is increased by 100%. Rinse and repeat this for each pillar until the boss dies. Extremely easy fight. We have reached the penultimate encounter in this raid, the Stone Legion Generals. I am rating this fight hard. This fight is not too bad, but there's a lot to know about it which warranted the hard rating. You will start the encounter with Call. Your goal here is to DPS her to 50% to begin the first transition phase. The gist of this encounter is to prioritize ads and then the boss. Some ads are not that deadly, but it's a good rule of thumb to just clear them out as you go, to make everything much more manageable. Stone Legion Goliaths are not that deadly, and is the first ad you will see. As you are killing it, Call will cast Call Shadow Forces. You will get 3 ads called Stone Legion Skirmishers. These need to be killed as soon as possible. Once they reach 30% HP, it will begin to take on an effigy and blow you off the cliff. To avoid this, just burst each ad down and move back to the boss. When you see the ability Pulverizing Meteor, just know after the cast ends, you will be stunned and then take a significant amount of damage, around 40% HP. Just be prepared and heal this back up. The mechanic is unavoidable, but can be immune. At 50% HP, General Call will use Hardened Stone form, reducing all damage taken by 95%. In this phase, you are meant to continue killing ads. Each ad you kill in this phase will drop an Anima Orb. Walk over it to collect it, and then run it into Prince Renathal. You will get knocked back. Repeat this with ads until you have filled Renathal's mana bar back to full. Once this phase ends, Grishal will land and become attackable, while Call flies away. This is essentially the same as when you fought Call. DPS any skirmishers down to avoid being pushed off the cliff. As you can see here, I forgot to do this and nearly died, but it's a good indicator of what happens if you ignore the ads. DPS Grishal to 50% and you will repeat the Anima Orb phase again. Nothing changes in this phase. You'll have some ground effects to avoid, but the strategy is the same. DPS an ad, grab the orb, take it to Renathal, and repeat until 100% mana. Once this phase ends, both bosses become attackable. You can burst one down or DPS at the same time. It doesn't really matter. Essentially, this is both phases combined, but it's basically the same strategy. Kill any adds, especially the skirmishers, and DPS the bosses down to achieve victory. Not the hardest encounter, but a lot of movement, damage taken, and mechanic knowledge earn this a hard difficulty. The final encounter is Sire Nathria. I am rating this fight intermediate. This would have gotten an easy rating, but the first phase actually requires a little understanding to get through it. When the encounter begins, you will have 6 stacks of a debuff called Burden of Sin. Your goal is to get Nathria to 70% HP with as little stacks as possible. The way the stacks are removed is through a frontal cone he does called Cleansing Pain. Each hit removes a stack. Some classes can ignore this mechanic entirely, more on that later. When the fight begins, you will take your first Cleansing Pain hit, taking you down to 5 stacks. When you are hit, an ad spawns called Echo of Sin. Kill this within 14 seconds, or it will give you back your Burden of Sin stack. Continue DPS on the boss, but do not push him to 70% until you've removed at least 3 stacks of your debuff. You can choose to remove all, but you want at least 3 stacks or less when you push him to 70%. Remornia will also cast an ability called Ravage, which fills up a set portion of the room. Just move out of this and take the boss with you. Once you have 3 stacks or less, you can DPS Nathria down to 70%. You will then move to the center and cast March of the Penitent. It will then pull you in and shoot you toward the edge of the room, where you will have 10 seconds to get within 16 yards of him, or you will wipe. As I mentioned earlier, some classes can avoid this mechanic. For instance, Blessing of Freedom will negate this effect entirely if cast right before he teleports away. It should be noted that you can only do abilities before the cast begins. Once it begins, you can no longer use the abilities. As you can see here, I mistimed my Blessing of Freedom and I wiped. If you don't make it to the middle in time, Nathria will judge you unworthy, and the subsequent fall to phase 2 will lead to you dying to fall damage. If you do make it in time, he will pull you down to where you can begin phase 2. What can I say? This phase is super easy. The only thing you kind of need to pay attention to is the Hand of Destruction. You don't need to run super far away like I did here, but just avoid damage when you can. At 40% health, he will teleport to the center and go into the final phase. He will shortly after do an ability called Shattering Pain, which will knock you back a decent distance. Position him so that you are always knocked back toward the center. Avoid the projectiles coming from the corners of each platform, as they will knock you back also, and potentially off the platform. If your DPS is good enough, you probably will only see one sinister reflection. This is just lines on the ground that you need to avoid, and Remornia will cover a portion of the room. Continue avoiding projectiles, and position yourself so each Shattering Pain doesn't knock you off the cliff, and this boss will fall. The final 2 phases are extremely easy. If you can make it past phase 1, you are essentially assured a victory. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions, as some of these encounters are extremely tough. Good luck on getting your transmog gear, and I'll see you in the next one. If you've enjoyed this video, please give this video a like and click on subscribe. Your support makes doing videos like these possible, and I could not do it without each and every one of you. Thanks, guys.